So I'm going to spend my 5 minutes talking about novel methods and what implications are for resilience measurement in 2020 and how that relates to food security policy and programming. So in an academic environment, we're always looking at emerging trends to make sure that our students are prepared for what's next, what's coming out. And so as part of that, you may have seen this paper by Nancy Mock and I in Global Food Security last year. But what we did is a big analysis of conventional food and nutrition security information, where you spend maybe 80-90% of your time collecting data. You have expert analysis and this sort of very small group of decision makers who looks at it. And what we looked at is mobile technologies and disruptive innovation and what are the implications of that on this value stream. And we found that that's probably going to change pretty radically and maybe turn it completely on its head to where data is everywhere and easy to access. Analysis tools are in users' hands, and most of the time is spent on feedbacks. And so, if nothing else, the paper is worth looking at just for its bibliography. So we do cover some things in this about UN Pulse and big data. You've probably seen this where tweets follow prices that match very close to surveys, or influenza reports match very closely to actual cases of influenza. But then we went through a larger review of the sort of original big data, which is a lot of the work that people in this conference have been working on for a long time, such as those iconic images of the green up of the Sahel in Africa, but then also global food security monitoring, global development monitoring. And that's really continued up till today. So just last year, I don't know if you've seen this, a 30-meter forest coverage product has come out. Can you imagine a 30-meter resolution drought product? Ask me how. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to host a big real-time data conference at Tulane next spring. And why is this important for resilience measurement? Well, if you look at a systems thinking approach to resilience, you look at different types of metrics. And so one of the things is these information feedback loops that are really important. And that's all about understanding stability and state changes. Or self-organization, the key to adaptation and learning, or transformation of systems. And all that's tied together by these hierarchies that coordinate the information and resource flows. And now if you start measuring these type of metrics, you actually can find appropriate leverage points for your policy and programs. And so I'm going to give you a quick example of one of the novel methods of crisis mapping, sort of the newest type of approach to bringing these different kinds of ecological, social, economic data sets together. So this is something my students put together. We work on disruptive innovation quite a bit. So we made a crisis map after the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, if you're familiar, and the BP oil spill. We got about 2,000 reports within about 4 months. And a lot of those were sort of Instagram and text messages about oil on wildlife. So actually documenting in a way that's hard to do with surveys, oil. But we also got a lot of other information. People were talking about changes in the taste of the food that they were eating, smells. They were making sense about how that was affecting their health. They were talking about how they were feeling about how it affected their cultural events and their livelihoods. And this is what we're talking about, rich data streams, totally new types of data that we haven't seen before, including some traditional surveys, but then also solutions and advocacy being mixed into this very rich data stream. Then you get these feedback loops, information feedback loops in the media, but then also policymakers. So we call them secretaries of environment, that's Ministry of Environment in the US, tweeting back about the news stories that they've seen about the crisis maps that were done by citizen reporters. So these very intricate feedback loops. Now if you start measuring these, you can really get some interesting metrics on resilience. So number of feedback loops, strengths of those feedback loops, but what about also policymakers? Are they paying attention? Is it influencing any programming? And what about demand for rights? This has been in front of the Senate many times. It's been in lawsuits. So we're seeing these multiple impacts of these types of information feedback loops. And how does that relate to resilience? Another example that's in Disaster Relief 2.0 was an evaluation we did of a Tufts University projects doing a crisis map after the earthquake in Haiti. And anyway, this tool that we're using, Ushahidi, was actually born here in East Africa. It comes from Kenya. And then we reapplied it in the United States and here in Haiti. And what we saw about the reports that were coming in through that is all about self-organization, another one of the major, probably the most important resilience measure there is. And this is a totally new data stream, and especially in that period right after a disaster when formal interventions are not even anywhere near meeting the people on the ground. We saw a lot of self-organization by spontaneous CBOs. We saw the role of the diaspora. We saw a lot of new voices, local institutions, informal groups and committees, and host families, all expressing their actual real experience and what that means. And so if we talk about the type of metrics of self-organization we can start developing from these rich data streams. Done? Maybe you've seen this. Further sensors, things will be connected further to the system, and the implications it has of systems thinking on these types of on metrics for the future. Thanks.